Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Siu, and this is the CISO's Office Hours. Today, I want to talk to you about how some of the things in cybersecurity steal or borrow techniques from other fields. I've always been a proponent of knowledge that cybersecurity being a new professional field, and by new, I mean a lot less than chemistry or mathematics or engineering, but it's a combined hybrid field for sure, from IT, security processes, physical safety, all those areas where we've borrowed, begged or stolen techniques or approaches from other domains. One of the things I think is interesting to note is that there are other things we can learn as we think through our incident response processes. Recently, I listened to a podcast by Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford Medical School about games and gaming and how these things affect how those gaming and approaches to play can be impactful to your brain and your mind. But also I've noticed and started to practice that it is useful for helping your team develop new skills, new pathways into how your team responds or works together. So kind of a blend of management as well as psychology, as well as process improvement. One of the key elements, and I will show you this video or a clip from this video that talks about childhood play and how that sets your mindset up, and then how you can use play or games for contingency testing. So let's take a look at what Andrew Huberman has to say.
Or you're not super proficient at something, but you enter it because it is low stakes and because there is information to learn about yourself and others, could start to open up these prefrontal cortex circuits. And when I say open up, I don't mean that literally there's an opening in your skull. What I mean is that your prefrontal cortex can work in very rigid ways, meaning if A, then B. If I go down this street, turn left, and go that way to work, it is fast. If I go down the other street, it's slow. If there's a traffic jam there, I'm going to go there. But it's starting to explore different possibilities, and there are very, very few opportunities in life to explore contingencies in this low-stakes way, such that it engages neuroplasticity of the prefrontal cortex. So play is powerful at making your prefrontal cortex more plastic, more able to change in response to experience, but not just during the period of play, but in all scenarios. Because you get one prefrontal cortex. You don't get a prefrontal cortex just for play. You get a prefrontal cortex that engages in everything.
One of the key elements that I thought you should take from that is that in a low stress environment, you can explore new options about how you think about your processes. And as a team, it's a good thing for you to think about how you can facilitate some games. In many cases, we think about the operations of cybersecurity as I'm sitting in front of a screen by myself or in a room with other people. But reality is you've got a team that has to work together in many different facets and ways. What I found is useful and probably interesting to you is a game called Backdoors and Breaches. That's from Blackhills Information Security. They started this game as a kind of a D&D type of Dungeons and Dragons type of approach where you roll a dice and you play against cards. Here's how the game works. You basically have a group of controls or procedures. I call them controls and procedures. You get 2 or 3 of these that the team owns. Then you also have a game master who picks a general sequence of how a cyber incident occurs. Starts out with initial compromise, then a pivot and escalate, followed by how C2 or command and control and exfiltration, and lastly, persistence. These are common patterns that are something that everybody should think about in their incident response cycle and how they work. If I have an attacker, they're getting in initial vectors. So what happens is you start the game with 4 cards that the team doesn't know. The game master, maybe not always the CISO, but whoever's running the game for you, should know what those are. And the team has to decipher what each of those different phase elements are. Very much like a real incident response. You may already have indicators, but do you have them all? Do you know where the pivots and escalations are happening? Do you know where to look within your environment? The idea with the game is, though, you've got specific controls or procedures that have been assigned at the very beginning of the game. If you use one of the ones, you use these procedures to elucidate what those 4 different elements are in terms of the initial compromise, pivot and escalate, C2 and exfiltration, and persistence. If you use the way the game is worked out, and I'll point out that you can play this online, and the rules are here. But the approach that you can use with your team is by playing this game in different sequences. You can use it to figure out your team dynamics and also train up your more junior folks into seeing the bigger picture. What's also useful in this, because it's a low stress environment, you can put people in different roles and ask them to test ideas. You can also, what I find is really useful is the roll of the dice. Because in reality, if you have too much of a scripted incident, you may think that that's the pattern for every incident. And experience tells us that there's a lot of randomness and a lot of new items that you didn't know about, or the shadow IT element that added to your outside your understanding of what your environment is like. Additionally, there are some elements of random happiness, if you want to call that, and they're called injects. And the inject cards come up when the team that rolls the dice rolls a specific sequence. I think in Blackhills pronounces it that if you roll a 1 or a 20 on the 20-sided dice, those are hard injects. You get into inject, you draw a random card. And some of the injects include, this one is you get a +2 modifier for log-related actions. So you get extra points, or sometimes it'll say your top responder goes on maternity leave and they're gone for 6 months. So you can't actually rely on that person. So the idea here is randomness does affect you. In my experience, even during running a large event during COVID-19 in 2020, we had to account for a lot of different things that wouldn't normally be your typical incident response, incident planning, such as what if someone gets COVID? What's our physical testing that we have to make sure everybody is well when they're in the environment? So ideally, you can use the game to help you think outside the box of what your standard incident response cycles are. As a consultant, we often do help people rewrite their incident response plans and then test them. And one of the ways to test them is to do a game situation like with this Backdoors and Breaches. One of the things I found has been useful and fun and helpful for clients as well as for the entire teams who are participating in this is playing Backdoors and Breaches as part of their tabletop exercise. I've sort of done it in a backwards way, though. I call it reverse Backdoors and Breaches. Reverse Backdoors and Breaches, yes. Because as a consultant, I may not know all the procedures that the organization has. Now, if I'm the fractional CISO, I do have a good understanding of where those are because I've helped the team develop those and proof them. But if you're coming in as just a one-time consultant to do that type of exercise, you may have to assume that the team knows what their procedures are and you don't as a facilitator. So why flip that around and I do it backwards? I give them the answers. The team then has to figure out which controls best suit that initial compromise detection, for example. Then we roll the dice. And they know the answer, but they have to connect the dots between all their infrastructure and all their services and tools, or even personnel and procedures. And if they have a procedure to answer that, but the dice fails, that means that procedure didn't work. And they get to roll a couple times, but if that procedure didn't work, then you're asking them to think, still in a low stress environment, it's a game, that what are they going to do if that doesn't work? In that sense, it doesn't become a devil's advocate kind of person always asking, what if? Sometimes it works when they get the random roll of the dice that says your control worked and you get the point. But all the other side of it is, so what if it doesn't work? So quite often I do see organizations who are very sanguine, confident in the quality of their controls. And as we learned from the SolarWinds incident a couple of years ago, that maybe you can't always trust your controls and you have to keep thinking in a playful way, a way to keep yourselves tuned in. So you don't get biased and focused in on too many specific rote answers. The world has never been rote. Rote helps you build up your understanding. Sometimes we call it muscle memory. When you're working out, you have to repeat and you have to lift heavier. In this case, this is kind of a light lift, again, low stress. But you can turn this into an opportunity to keep your team constantly working, constantly understanding and looking for new things. It also helps address some of the burnout that you might get of people staring at screens or not seeing progress the way they need it to go. I have not tried this with an executive team, but it works really well for technical teams. If you have any ideas about how you can play games and use gaming in low stress opportunities to test contingencies, let me know. But it'd be worth a conversation. So, in conclusion, you can use games, childhood play mindset, in order to open up your brain functions, in order to think outside the box, test new approaches, contingencies. You can put people in different roles. If you have someone who's never been an incident response leader, but they've been on the incident response for a while, you may find that they step into that role a little better after having been playing in a game. Nothing wrong with a lot of repetitive exercises, because sometimes you get so caught up in real incidents that maybe you're not necessarily turning all those lessons learned into an easy way to adopt new ones. If it's stressful, the game also helps you test new things and see if it was going to work or not. So I recommend you try these things. If you have questions or you want some help, do give us a call at Inversion6 and see if we can help you. Thanks for your time.